afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Yun Lu. Thank you for joining the weekly education talks on Thursday at 3 p.m. The talks are organized by CAPA HC, Chinese American Parent Association of Howard County. And this event is sponsored by COED, Howard County Community Organizations Active in Disaster. Today, we have a special guest, Ms. Kui Zhao, who will introduce our presenter. Ms. Kui Zhao is a veteran local government employee in the planning profession certified by American Institute of a Certified Planner. Ms. Zhao currently works for the Baltimore County government. She is devoted to community services as appointed Human Rights Commissioner at the pleasure of Howard County executives Alan Goetemann and Calvin Ball for 2 terms since 2016. Ms. Zhao served on the Maryland Governor O'Malley's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs for 2 terms between 2007 and 2015. Welcome, Ms. Zhao.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Yunlu. Good afternoon, everybody. Once again, my name is Kui Zhao. I reside in Howard County, Maryland. I have known Theo, it's my honor to introduce Theo Goetemann as the guest speaker for Dr. Yunlu's show, sorry. I have known Theo for a few years. His City 78 and I worked together for a comprehensive land use planning study to identify buildable parcels in the DC metropolitan region. City 78 was Theo's first co-founded startup right after his graduation from Georgetown University. The firm specializes in AI and data science applications in city planning. Recall last week or 2 weeks ago, Chris Davis, my colleague, had a talk show about city planning, which was very fascinating and still very fascinating. In May last year, Theo was one of my 5 panelists for CAPA's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month celebration in Howard County. The panel's title was Up Close and Personal with Distinguished Panelists. It was also my honor last year, or in 2018 actually, and last year, as Theo's reference for his application for the Fulbright scholarship to conduct intensive research on rapid urban development, tourism, consumer preferences, and historical preservation in Wuhan, China. Theo presently runs Basil Labs, a startup with an emphasis on AI applications regarding consumer intelligence. This week, his Basil Labs launched Go Safely, an application that captures real-time perceptions to show which places are safe on school campuses nationwide. See, Theo, I did read your post on LinkedIn. His achievements at a young age can go on and on. Now, welcome Theo for his show with Dr. Yunlu. Thank you.
Thank you, Kui. Oh, should I just get started?
Yeah,
Dr.
yes,
yes.
Oh, okay.
Please, thank you so much for the introduction.
Thank you.
Kui, thanks for reading that.
Mute.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Go ahead.
Go
ahead, Theo.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to talk about starting your own projects this summer. Great. Okay, so specifically starting your own coding projects this summer. I think that the best way to actually get started about talking about how do you start something? How do you decide what should I start? Where do I start? You know, I don't know anything, or I don't know how to get started, or the things that I've only done so far are in the classroom. I don't really know how to do my own project. So we're going to go through how to do that. So first, a bit about me. I'm from Boston. I really like music, and I'm really bad at singing, and so I've always done a lot of electronic music. So I've worked with computers a lot, with programs, but I've never really, you know, as a kid, I never coded or never did anything computer science-y. My friend one time did tell me that I should code, but then I didn't for 3 or 4 years, actually. So I remember very distinctly my friend said, hey, if you like music and you like going through these logical things of how to create a song, you'd probably like coding. And yeah, I never did it, even after that. So I started a startup called Basil Labs, and we do really cool stuff around coding and mapping, but it took a long process to get there. So I'll tell you a bit about how I ended up doing what I do now and making these cool maps and doing all kinds of big data analytics and understanding how do people feel across the nation. It's a long journey. So I think that that's actually what we're talking about today too, is we aren't actually talking about how to code. We're talking about how do you actually get to a place to make your project happen, right? How do you actually get to the spot where you feel confident that this is my project, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna start it, I'm gonna have all the problems, and I'm gonna finish it. And so really, we're gonna talk a lot about people and the people around you and how they can actually help you start your own projects. So it's me and two friends from a long time ago. So let's talk about what kind of projects are we talking about? What kind of projects could you start? Well, you can make your own app. You can make like a to-do list. There's tons of tutorials out there on how to do that. You could take a to-do list and you can slightly modify it to do something else. You could work with robots. You can take an existing website and you can clone it, meaning that someone already on the internet has built the exact replica of a fully functional website that you use. And you can just take a look at all of the different code, all the different things they did. And that's another way of learning, actually, is you don't have to build stuff. You can take stuff that it's open and everyone can use on the internet, download it, look through all of the things, change one thing, change one color on the website. It's a really fun way of learning, actually. You can do art, generative art, like in the bottom left here. I used to do a bit of it. I've never been good at it, but it's there. It's very cool stuff. You can make something for your local community. So you can figure out what's a problem locally and how do I solve that? What can I build for it? Or you can do analytics. So that's actually how I got started with coding. Is I was interested in solving a problem. I needed to understand how do people feel in Congress and in politics. And I needed a way of doing that so I don't have to read everything. And so that's actually how I got started with coding. All right, so why do you do a project? The first thing is you can become a jack of all trades. If you actually do a project, you aren't just learning coding, you're learning leadership, you're learning how to work with people, you're learning how to do marketing, you're learning how to talk with people around you, figure out what kind of problems do they have, how do they feel about your project. There's a lot of different fields that are surrounded if you actually make your own project. If you're always working in the classroom or if you're always working on someone else's project, you only do one piece of it. But if you make your own project, you end up doing so many other things, and it's a really good experience. You also learn how to work with people, specifically with your friends. The hardest thing in the world is to work with your friends. Maybe family would be the only harder thing, right? You love them to death, but it's also very hard to disagree. And so one of the biggest learning experiences that you can have early on is learning how to disagree productively and how to take that disagreement and actually build something stronger. And the last thing is you can buff your resume. It's really good to have your own project on your resume. It shows initiative, that you are self-learning. You can manage your own time. There are so many things about having your own project on your resume that speak volumes about who you are and your character, way more than the actual technical skills that it took to do it. So my story, I hinted at it before, is I had a very slow start. I was interested in politics and music. And I thought that I was going to do research and just research a lot of things and never work with numbers, never work with coding. But along the way, I realized that if I want to do research effectively, I can't just read. I need a computer or I need a machine to actually do a lot of the work for me. Because if I want to do the kinds of analysis or the kinds of research that I find exciting, it's at a really big scale. And so if you're doing work at a really big scale, suddenly you need to start knowing how to code so you can have the computer do a lot of the work for you. And the second thing is my friends. My friends said, hey, let's do a project together. And if you don't have friends around you that will say, hey, let's do a project, be the friend. Start the project yourself and get your friends to get going. And through the years, I've built several different ventures, and I'm very proud and happy with them. All right, so how do we get started? If you want to build a project this summer, August, going into the school year, talk to your friends first. It's the best way to get started. It's exciting, and more importantly, you'll actually be able to say, hey, let's start this week. We're going to do steps 1, 2, and 3. Next week, we're going to do step 4, 5, and 6. And the week after, we do, 7, 8, 9. And so actually working with other people keeps you to deadlines. Otherwise, you're never going to get anything done. And you're always going to be guessing and being like, is this good enough? Is this good enough? Start working with friends. It's a great way to get started. Another thing is think about your personal interests. I really like music. So actually the first coding project I ever did was with music. And so think about what you really like to do, and can you start, adding some code or adding some different elements into it to build your own projects. And think about what you want to do. If you're, young and you don't have to think about careers, then that's awesome. Think about your interests and your friends. But if you're starting to think about what do I want to do when I'm older, coding is actually so broad now. You don't actually develop apps. So actually for my startup, I don't actually do any app development. I have other people do that. I do the research side of things. So I'll take in all of this data from all over the world, and then I'll write scripts to actually process that and turn that into something that is easy for our researchers to use. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with code, and there's a lot of different fields. You can do health, you could do, and medicine, you could do retail, you could do, you name it. There are a lot of different fields out there, and they all apply to building your own project. I would say two other things to start. Two other ways to start is to sit down and relax and think about your day. And by thinking about your day, you'll start thinking about, oh, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe I should do that. And the best way to actually sit down is to read. And it could be on your phone, totally cool. Read the news, read new things, read things that you never read before. And by reading different things, personally, I really use medium.com. It's a lot of other people who are interested in entrepreneurship, and they post their own articles. So I read through other people's articles and other people's thoughts, and it's the best way for me to get new ideas. Okay, so actually, how do we start? That was really high level. Get ourselves in right now. Best way is to jump in. You have to do it right now. Like this afternoon, start Googling things of like, maybe I could do this. But if you never start, then, well, you're never going to start. You need to think about the big picture. So if you don't understand why you're doing it now, you'll actually never be motivated. So if your parents say, hey, this is a really good talk, I want you to start a project. Think about, do I actually want to start a project, right? Because if you don't want to start it, then it's not going to be a good project and you aren't going to learn anything. So what you need to do is think about, why do I want to do it? And then just jump in and start going with that. Talk to friends. Again, I can't emphasize it enough. I don't know if you know Show Community, great show, but partnering up is one of the best ways to just start now. And the last thing is always talk to people. I think one of the best advice I've ever got in my life is saying that, okay, if you have an idea, share it with people. Because if you don't share it, it's not actually that good of an idea, right? And so you need to talk to people and say, hey, what do you think about that? What do you think about this? And people will get annoyed with you, but that's okay. You can be the idea person. It's one of the best ways to think about, starting to understand how to think of good projects. All right, so we do need to talk about technology. And I have a resource for everyone that should be helpful. It has a list of a lot of different tools and platforms and websites that I use in my own work and my team uses. A lot of them, I think almost all of them are free too, so you can use them to just get started. I don't think you'll need any of the higher plans for company size. But these tools, I think, are some of the best ways to organize your projects, to find the right colors for your app, or to figure out like, how do I set my deadlines for my friends. But even before you get into this, the best thing to do to get involved in coding and get involved in your projects is to Google and Reddit. So go on Google and just type in, to-do list, how to make coding. And there'll be tons of results on how to get started. I think there are too many results. So usually when I need good advice on a project, I actually type in something like, let's say, right now we're building a robot for retail spaces, right? So I would type in like, object detection or video detection bot, Reddit, how to coding, right? And it'll actually come up with all of these other people who had the same question. Other people talk about it with them. So you can read through expert advice from other people, and they'll have links all over the place. So hold the control button on your computer and just click all the links and then read through all of those. And so if you don't know where to start right now, you don't know what languages to use to code, you don't know what project you want to do, type in, you know, summer coding projects Reddit. There are lists. I just checked before this talk. There's tons of lists for that, right? Or if you know what you want to do, right, but you just don't know what language to do it in, you can type in like, I don't know, like let's say, you know, coffee store finder app, how to code, which coding language. And then Reddit will probably have the answer for you. It'll say like, okay, someone made a coffee, you know, maybe in Australia, but they made an app and they had a question. I don't know what language to use to start. And people will give advice like, oh, you probably want to use this framework to get started, but if you're a beginner, you want to use this. It's a really good community on there for getting ideas. So here's the link. I think that Dr. Liu can send over it later as well, but it has the Excel spreadsheet there. So all the different tools on getting started with your own projects. You can scan the QR code with your phone right now, or you can just type that in or write it down. And then Dr. Liu can send it out later too. But that's my resource for you on getting your project started. These are the best tools that I've found that don't charge you a lot of, you know. Okay. So if you're discouraged, if you know, people are pressuring you to do a project, or if you don't know where to start, or you don't think that you can code, think about me. I started very, very late and it turned out okay, right? And so the best thing to do is to think about who are you and what do you like to do? Why do you want to do the project? How do you get started? Who are the people around you? Where can I get inspiration? What can I read? And then finally, think about what projects do I want to, you know, what projects do I actually want to do? So I would actually go in that order. Don't start with what kind of project do I want to do? Make sure that you're aligned inside and figure out that this is something that I like to do already. It is something that aligns with, you know, me and my friends, we all want to do it. And, you know, I read something about it right now that's really interesting. I'm excited. I think we can build this, right? So don't start with the tech, always start with the problem, or always start with you. And that's it. So the idea is that if you get started this summer and you have extra time before school starts, you can get started with the tools that I listed there. I'll just give two pieces of advice. The first is that the harder part is not actually building it. The harder part is managing, you know, people and relationships, and managing your own time and managing your own enthusiasm. So if you can set goals for yourself with a project management app, or even like just write it down as a to-do list, I think that's the best way to actually get started on a project. Otherwise, you'll start 50 projects but never get to step 2 with any of them. And the second thing is that if you are building something now and you get discouraged, or you get too busy, maybe sports start or something like that, that's good. That means that next year you can build something even stronger, even faster. And it's that iteration, by doing it again and again, that you actually get better at it. Cool. So those are all of my thoughts, Dr. Liu. That's the end of my presentation there.
Thank you for the great talk. So for any of you who have questions, you can put your question in the chat. I have a question. Okay, so I think I see one question. How would your interest in politics and music help you determine to create startups such as City 78 and the Basil Labs?
Kui, that's a hard question. I think that my mom always said that my music never helped me for my career, but I disagree. I think that, you know, my interest in software and always, you know, spending hours and hours and hours fixing little things within a song is the same kind of mindset that is required to, you know, write code that's really long. It's also, I would say that, you know, my interest in politics, it was never politics. It was always understanding communities and like listening to communities. So that was my problem. My problem was I needed to listen to more people. You know, I don't want to just like read 50 people and analyze 50, you know, Congress members. I want to use code to analyze every single one of them, right? And so the only way I could do that was learning code. So I had a problem and I needed to solve it, and I had to learn code for it.
Yeah, so I think lots of the students will have a difficult think about how I can start, right? Or what to start. And you mentioned that you need to think about what your interests are and what your friends' interests are. So the question for you is, for students at a young age, sometimes they may have different interests. It's really hard to tell what they really want to do in the future. So do you have any suggestion for them? How do they reflect on themselves? What can help them to understand themselves better? And what if their friends have different interests, how they agree with each other, or how they learn to agree to disagree?
Well, they can find new friends. No, I think this last slide here, I don't know if you could still see it, but the reason I chose a really small Lego thing that was being built instead of a big thing is the idea that I can stop sharing also. But the idea is that you don't have to actually build the biggest thing in the world. So actually my first startup was called Move 78, and it was with two friends, and we all had very, very different interests. One of them wanted to do a fitness app. I wanted to do something around communities and BuzzFeed and news. And then one of them wanted to do something around, I think it was sports. And so 3 different things. And what we decided was, well, we can't do them all at once, but we have, 6 months, right, for this semester. So what we'll do is the first 2 months, we'll work on one, and then we'll keep working on it, but we'll start our efforts on the next one. And the person with the worst idea did go last. But the idea is that you don't want to build a huge thing. You just want to build something very small. And, especially if you haven't done it before, the best way to feel good about yourself is to build something small first, rather than trying to build something large and never finishing it. So definitely build something small with your friends. And hey, if 2 of your friends want to do something that you say is not so excited about, it's still good learning. I would say go along with it. Or you can, tell your friends, I really want to do this. But definitely all of those projects need to be small. If someone's saying something really big, then you have to say, whoa, wait a second, that's too big. Theo said in the webinar that big projects are bad to start with. I would say do big projects after failing 3 or 4 times.
Thank you for the great suggestions. So basically, we're just like building small pieces, just like Lego piece, right? So we start small, and then later we can expand to something larger. There's another question. Adobe XD for prototyping is great, and I think it's free, and so is Unity for game that, and Blender, 3D design, animation, and rendering. Don't forget Fusion 360. I think that's a comment. Aiden,
Yeah,
you unmute yourself if you want to elaborate more.
I mean, I can elaborate too, Aiden, if you don't want to. I think it's great. Yeah, there's tons of great, freemium software out there. I personally think Adobe, most of their stuff is very expensive. And for the number of students who need to use Adobe, even with the student discount, like paying like $20 a month is a lot. So Adobe XD has a nice like free tier where you can do 1 or 2 documents. I think LucidPress is a really good thing for prototyping, and it lets you do 10 as a student, 10 documents. I don't like Canva so much. And yeah, so yeah, I think Blender is fantastic. Also Unity. Fusion 360, if you don't actually have if you can't be validated by your school, you can't actually use it. So you have to be with an affiliated school for Fusion 360. But all those are great software, yeah.
So for the next school year, basically, at least until the end of January, the students will do virtual learning and online learning. So do you have any suggestions that if they won't be able to meet their friends in person, how to start a project?
I don't know what messaging apps everyone uses now. I feel like we're a couple of years difference, but I use a lot of Facebook Messenger and Telegram because it lets us send like larger files quickly. So there's logistic things to figure out. I think that's a quick answer. If you don't see your friends that much and you're always talking to them anyways, set up a dedicated time every week and better yet, do a standardized time twice a week, right? Just 30 minutes is fine. One of them, do the big things, like thinking about the big picture and what you want to do. Keep yourself excited. The other one, do all of the logistics. This week, we're going to do 1, 2, and 3 steps. And in order to do those steps, we need to, do these subtasks. So setting up dedicated times where you're always going to meet is probably the best way, I think, for if you aren't meeting anyone in person. And then for online learning, I would say that online learning is kind of, it's not active learning, right? It's passive. And I'm not saying to read other things while you're doing you're listening to your lectures or, listening to class, but I do think that it gives you more time, right? Or more brain space. You have, at the end of the day, you're still kind of active. You aren't tired because you weren't interacting with everybody. So use that energy into something productive for the semester.
And I think probably lots of sports teams may not go back to practice. So I think also students will have more time. And also for Howard County, instead of have a 7 study period for 5 days per week, now we have a 4x4 model, which means that 4 classes and 4 days per week. So I think lots of students will have more time and will think about, well, how to start a project or something else, or hobby, or learn new things, or how to make good use of the time virtually. So basically right now they will have more time that they can use.
That's great. I think it's really good to be bored. If you're never bored, then you never have ideas, right? So you need to be bored and just sit there and think about stuff and read new things, watch new movies or whatever it is to get new things into. So for me, I listen to a lot of podcasts that I never listened to before, but I really like listening to things I have never heard before because it helps me more on thinking about stuff. So good to be bored. It's good to be bored.
Yeah. I think that's a great perspective because when you are bored, actually you have more time to slow down and think about something new. Yeah. Okay, I think Kui has a question. Tell us about your applications engaged in Parasite movie.
So actually, I still haven't watched Parasite. I'm half Korean, but I haven't watched it yet. My friend watched it and she thought it was really, really interesting on the translation. So she's from Seoul. And so she said, Theo, we should use our, it's called natural language processing. And what it does is it just lets you take in a lot of different text, right? Like an entire document of text, and you can find out what's important inside of that text, right? So she said, let's use all of our technology to understand long documents, and let's actually take that and understand Parasite. And so, so you can take in like a entire text of like Parasite and find out what are the most important themes throughout the entire document. How do people feel in terms of sentiment? Different characters feel about different things. So my work is a lot with natural language processing and machine learning. And so we're taking in a lot of data and feeding it to a much smarter computer than us that's going to like figure out all of these different possibilities and predictions. And at the end of it, it's going to say, okay, Theo, I think that, the most important things are topic 1, 2, and 3. And the most important things in terms of how people feel, sentiment, is good, bad, and bad. So that's what we do. And we had an article about Parasite, about how you can learn and how Korea can do a better job of activating curiosity.
Kui has a follow-up question. Why would you believe that data science is fundamental in city or regional planning?
That's a good one. So I'm not actually an urban planner, so I don't actually know so much about cities. I've worked in the field for a bit, but I would say that data science is really important in every single field. And so if your parents are saying like you need to do coding and you need to do data science, I heard on a podcast or I read in the news that data science is the most important thing for the future. It's kind of true, but let's do it like this. Is like my technology for understanding long documents of text, right? Natural language processing. That's really helpful for every field, actually. So I use it in city and regional planning. So we can take in lots and lots of data about how do people talk about spaces. And then we can say, okay, people talk about this park, and they talk about bringing their family, and they talk about, they feel like it's a neighborhood. So my technology takes all of that text, and then we turn all of that into a dashboard. So the city officer knows that, oh, look, people like this park. We should give this park more money, right? And so that's what we do. I would say also, though, that data science within all of the computer and coding and everything, data science is really important because you can use it for everything. So if you wanted to do something around, hospitals, or if you wanted to do something around sports, sports and NBA analysis with data science is so popular right now. I think we actually have an intern who's really interested in NBA right now. But there's every single field, no matter what you like to do, data science is a great application and a great way to get started.
I have a question. So right now we are in the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you think would be the impact of this pandemic on your company and also new projects?
So our company is doing well with the pandemic. I think a lot of companies have their companies rely very heavily on consumers coming out, to spend money or to do things, especially retail startups. So retail entrepreneurship is really doing bad right now. What we do is we do a lot of analytics. And so a lot of people need analytics right now. So we're actually doing okay. After the pandemic and coming through it, I think the biggest thing is being, being okay with pivoting. So the idea that, okay, we do this today, but maybe a global pandemic happens, right? So what do we do tomorrow? Well, if people are asking for something different during the pandemic, maybe we should actually build around that instead of trying to do what we do really, really well. So in the same way, if you're working with your friends and they really, really want to do this, right? But then maybe like a competition happens and what you built is almost ready for the competition. You could just keep doing what you're doing, but the best thing to do, I think, is to change a couple of things and then put in the competition. So now more people learn about your stuff and it's, you get more feedback and it's more exciting. So that's but in general, I think our company is doing a bit of a pivot and it's going pretty well.
That's really good. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for the students? Let's say during this pandemic, is there anything that you think they can do to help others during this pandemic when they start a new project?
Well, I would say that, this whole thing was about coding. I think I'm a good example because I was a very bad coder to start. I think everyone is, but so I was talking about that. But you can actually start a project around anything. You don't have to do anything around coding, right? So if you want to do art right now, or if you want to, this is such a great time to, for people with time and fortunate enough to have the time during the pandemic, especially for kids, it's such a good time to get started with something. So just ask around, talk to people. It's the biggest conversation, right? Everyone's talking about it always. So you probably have people around you, whether it's your parents, grandparents, friends, teachers, whoever it is, mentors. They probably have a couple of things that they heard that they're like, I think we can improve this, or I think this needs fixing. So it could just be volunteering somewhere. But yeah, there's just a lot of places to innovate right now because we've never had this before.
And I know that lots of students like to play video games. Is there anything that they can do that can help them, let's say, build maybe a new game or improve the game?
I think the gaming industry is doing really well right now, right? Because everyone's at home.
Yeah.
I don't personally play any video games. Maybe the last time was when I was maybe like 12 or 13. Just no time, right? No time. But I would say that if you're interested in game development, using tools like some that Aiden was mentioning for Blender or for Unity, those are fantastic tools to get started. They have kind of a large learning curve, but YouTube exists. So definitely just look up on YouTube how to get started, and it'll list out exactly step by step of how to do, you know, what you need to do. Yeah, it's a very fun space. And I think gaming is another thing like data science. Gaming is now going to be in every single field. So even if it's like a flight simulator for going to the moon, right? Astronauts will use games to get there. So you don't actually have to build something for your, your mom to use on the phone for like a farm app, right? You can actually build something around like solving a problem, you know, and yeah, there's just a lot of space to innovate and take those skills and apply it to the pandemic too.
I think with the development of new technology, people more rely on like smartphones or big data. Yeah, because I remember that, well, 10 years ago when we travel, actually we have to go to AAA to grab a real map. But now people just look at smartphone, and also you can have the instant feedback of the traffic pattern because everyone is using their smartphone.
Using their
can
phones,
locate
yeah.
their locations, right? So it's very different. Yeah,
very different. Yeah. There's a lot of data out there to use. A big thing is making sure that you're doing it responsibly and respecting people's privacies. So if you ever get into, you know, any kind of data mining or any kind of things where you're taking information from the internet and using it for your own projects, make sure that you're respecting people's, you know, there's a whole space for that right now. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Respect other people's privacy. Yes, that's very important. And also at the same time, I think you also learn how to protect your own privacy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Because I'm a statistician, so in our field previously, I think we mostly work on development methodologies, derive equations. But starting from last year, I can see a shift of the focus because we're talking about big data. And then for the year that we give the presidential award to non-theoretical statistician, actually who is the person who developed our studio.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a pretty big deal to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. I just gave a talk actually on, or a webinar on big data and how we're asking the wrong questions a lot of the time now. So we're just trying to find better, higher R-squared values, lower P values, and just getting the metrics to really, to show off, right? So with all of the technology right now, we're always trying to show off and slightly improve what the last person did rather than trying to solve real problems. So not that, the inventor of R-squared, I think, is definitely solving a real problem, but in terms of this talk and, just starting your own projects, sometimes it doesn't need to be really impressive technology. Sometimes really, really simple technology is the best solution.
Yeah. And then because nowadays, I think we have lots of information coming in. As you said, when you start your project, you don't want to read everything by yourself. You want a computer to help you to read all the information. So now my question is for the students who start to read something from the internet and try to develop their idea, how can they tell whether some information is accurate or not? Because sometimes on the internet, there may be inaccurate information, right? And there are lots of information. So what suggestion do we have for those students? How can they tell that the information is accurate and helpful?
Well, I would say that one of the beautiful things of certain parts of the internet, like, for example, the entrepreneurship or coding parts of Reddit, is that they're really supportive. And if they're not supportive, it's another person trying to sell their stuff. And so it's still good advice, right? Or half good advice. So I would say that a lot of the information, if you find the right places, it can be really data rich, right? A lot of the right information all at once, right? If you just find that one thread, you get all the information that you could ever need right there. So yeah, I think finding the right communities is important, right? And then joining them and asking questions too is really important. I think GitHub is this website where a lot of people put their code, and participating in GitHub and actually asking questions and raising issues. If you have a problem with someone else's code, is a really great way to actually learn. And it's less lonely too, right? If you're always on your computer. But yeah, so I would say that most of the time, the information you're going to find if you're asking how to do a project is going to be accurate already. I would say that if you're trying to use information online as a data source, right, for your own project, then you have to figure out if it's fake or real. I mean, there's a lot of companies that do that. We're actually, I have some of my researchers working on a fake review detector. So we'll be pushing that out hopefully for like a peer reviewed journal. But it's still a field that's being researched, right? No one really has a good answer for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your suggestion on find the right community is very important because I agree with you that when we look for information, it's not like scattered around the internet independently. Many times we'll find that there's a community full of very useful information. So basically, you can find a cluster.
Yeah. Once you find the cluster, then you can find all the related information. And
yeah. And we can
sounds
also
like your own work.
Yeah, also ask questions.
Yeah, and asking questions is super important.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the great talk. And if anyone have questions, you can put in the chat. So I will give around a couple minutes to write their questions. Well, we don't see any question. And thank you so much for the great talks. I hope that the student can learn how to start their project, because I know that this fall they will have plenty of time. It can be anything that you are interested in, and also find a friend who want to work together with you, and also learn how to agree to disagree, because we all have our own interests, right? So your best friends or your family members may have different opinions. So try to learn from them, try to see from their perspective, from their angle. Okay. And thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, bye.
All right, take care.